Hi, it's Ted Ritzer, host of the Greening Government webinar speaker series. The speaker series is a collaboration between my department, Alberta Environment and Parks, the Alberta Climate Change Office, and the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre. The goals of the speaker series are to help governments in Alberta reduce their carbon footprint and to grow their green economy. And sort of the theme of the presentations today is on sort of a possibility of a blockchain-powered green economy in Alberta. And the reason this whole thing got started was Mark Anilski did a presentation on sort of growing Alberta's green economy. And in that presentation, he really focused on the significance of and the history of ATB Financial in Alberta and how it's really strategic. And ever since that, I've been kind of monitoring sort of what ATB has been up to. And on November 15th, there was a press release on ATB's adoption of a blockchain-based digital identity approach. And in that article, Mike Brown, the director of innovation, was quoted as saying, "There is no emerging technology with greater capacity to improve the processes and outcomes of the services we provide our 730,000 Albertan customers." And Mike, when I read that article and that quote about the adoption of the Sovrin blockchain-based digital identity by ATB, I thought, holy cow. I mean, I think governments in Alberta should take a look at what you guys are doing. And from what my research, it seems that not only are you leading within Canada, it seems like ATB Financial is leading within financial institutions within North America on the adoption of blockchain technology. So that's why I wanted to get Mike to present into the series here, and it's so wonderful that you've agreed to do this, Mike.
Great. Thank you for having me, Ted. I'm looking forward to it. Just going to go ahead and bring up my presentation. So yeah, good morning and thanks, Ted. Really appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak with you and be a part of your series. As you mentioned, I'm Director of Innovation with ATB. I've been with ATB just over 1 year, so about 13 months. And during that time, my responsibility is to kind of lead all of our blockchain-related activities. ATB has been kind of monitoring and looking at the blockchain space for about the past 4 or 5 years. But really kind of got actively involved about 18 months ago, and I'll kind of walk through what we've been doing. So yeah, so the focus, is how do we kind of reimagine what we're doing and, change the way that we do our banking services and take advantage of, blockchain technology. So what I want to start with here is, really what blockchain technology does is it kind of breaks down the kind of the chains or the barriers that have been put in place by institutions that have been created for centuries. Governments, for example, banks, for example, insurance companies, all exist because they provide trust and they provide services, to citizens and businesses. So, banking, for example, been around for centuries, and what we do for our customers, they can bring money in, bring checks in, they can buy a home, they can buy a car, and the banks are there to support them. And the consumers can trust that, we're there and that their money is safe and secure. And, obviously there's deposit insurance and those types of things. But, really when Bitcoin came about, it really kind of showed that, a technology and a platform could replace that kind of ecosystem that, bank provides so far as the movement of value. So really, caused a lot of industries to kind of pause and look at, how do we actually take advantage of this technology? How do we use it for, improving our services, improving the way we work without being completely, disintermediated? So that's where our focus is with blockchain. It's kind of looking, going, what are the systems we have in place today? What are the, the organizations we collaborate with that are out there that are providing this trust role, and how do we look at and say, how can we use technology such as blockchain to facilitate providing trust between parties. So just to kind of step back and look at Bitcoin a bit, it's been around for about 8 years now. I think there's upwards of a couple $100 billion worth of value in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So there's significant value in the system, and yet the core of the Bitcoin system hasn't been hacked into and broken. It's there are issues on the fringe, on the edge, in wallets being cryptocurrencies being or Bitcoin being stolen out of wallets, or some providers, some exchanges or such where their servers get hacked into, but the core transactions in the Bitcoin network have never been hacked into. So it has demonstrated, I think it's really solid, if you want to call it proof of concept or pilot of the technology, and it's actively being used. That said, the fundamentals of Bitcoin, there are several challenges with it. The number of transactions it can handle, approximately 3 to 5 per second, versus a Visa type network can handle tens of thousands of transactions per second. So Bitcoin is there, it's operating, it's useful, but it's not in its current state going to replace a lot of payment methods that we currently use, such as credit cards or debit machines, that type of thing. So what can we learn from Bitcoin, and how can we build on top of it? The other aspect or limitation that Bitcoin has, and Ethereum as well, is the energy consumption. And that's one thing to keep in mind when we look at blockchain technologies is how much energy do they consume. And both Ethereum and Bitcoin use what's called a proof of work method for achieving their consensus. And that's a very computationally intensive process. There's thousands of servers around the world that are all computing. It's basically a race every 10 minutes to be the miner that solves the puzzle first in that 10-minute window. And the reward is, currently it's about 12.5 Bitcoin, which is, probably about $200,000 Canadian every 10 minutes is a reward that these Bitcoin miners get. So they have, significant economic motivation to do what they're doing, but there's a significant cost to all of society for doing that. All the electricity that's being used to run all those servers. I've heard it mentioned that's more electricity now than the entire country of Ireland consumes, and there's actually websites out there that track the energy consumption. So as we kind of look at blockchain technologies, we also need to keep that in mind and realize we don't want to be using that type of technology for our day-to-day services, in banking in particular. So basically what's happened over the last few years is a lot of people have looked at Bitcoin and Ethereum and said, how do we build on top of this, yet make the protocols better? So several new blockchain protocols have emerged over the last few years, and many of those protocols are more enterprise friendly. So they're meant for more enterprise type environments, and that's more where our focus is. And with these new protocols that are coming out, they don't have the same energy consumption that Bitcoin or Ethereum have, because they don't use a proof of work methodology for achieving consensus. They use other methods to kind of go through and achieve the same end result, but not go through such a computationally intensive process. The reason it's necessary for Bitcoin is that in the Bitcoin environment, it's a public, permissionless, anonymous environment. So anybody can jump on, anybody can be involved. You truly don't know who's out there doing what on the system. Versus in many of the enterprise systems that we look at, you know who your parties are. The people you're interacting with are more known, especially in the banking world. We have our KYC, our Know Your Customer requirements. So that helps kind of lower some of the requirements when it comes to that consensus method. So I'll touch on that a little bit. So what I want to walk through is look at how ATB is addressing blockchain and how We've got about 4 different areas that we're currently working on, and I'll just kind of walk through what those are. So the first is, how do we disrupt ourselves again, before becoming the next Blockbuster or Kodak or whomever. The financial services space recognizes that Bitcoin as a method for value transfer is squarely in the financial services space, and there's a lot of pressure in this industry to kind of look, saying, how do we deliver services better, faster, cheaper, and make sure we don't get replaced by something like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum. So to that end, there's a consortium formed called R3. It's been maybe 2 or 2.5 years that they were formed, and ATB is a member of this consortium. There are about 140 members globally. So most of these are banks or central banks, some insurance companies, but really the purpose here is for the banking industry to come together and collaborate on solutions. In most cases, most of the solutions are situations where it's an interbank situation where the banks are communicating together, the banks are all operating. So it's not a competitive situation between the banks, because if one bank went away and created something by themselves, but it relies on other banks to utilize it, then it's likely not going to be adopted very easily. So through R3, they've done a very good job of bringing the banks together. I think to date, they've done between about 80 or 100 different projects, tackling a whole wide variety of issues or processes within the banking, cash management, global payments, insurance, exchanges, a whole number of topics within the banking sector. They're looking at how they use blockchain technology. One of the outcomes as well within the R3 space is, again, back to the protocols. One of the things they did early on in their days was to look at all the existing protocols that were currently available and evaluate whether or not they were appropriate for the banking industry needs. Again, based on the results of their analysis, they determined that there wasn't one protocol out there that really met their needs very well. So they went about creating a new protocol, and that's a blockchain protocol or distributed ledger protocol called Corda. And Corda is a unique distributed ledger protocol, kind of inspired by blockchain, but doesn't, again, use the exact same process that a Bitcoin or Ethereum would. And it's meant for really the banking environment or kind of similar industries that have similar requirements. It's a permission system. So, if you're operating in this environment, you need to be, operating server that has permissions to be there. So it helps control the participants, and therefore, again, helps reduce some of the security or privacy risks that banks would be concerned about. So that was a big step for R3 to develop that protocol, and then to work with industry to get developers kind of globally trained on it, and ATB has developer trained on it, and several banks do. So with a project within the R3 consortium, banks, there may be 5 or 6 banks in a project, maybe 10, and each bank puts in resources, whether they're architects or developers or business analysts, to collaborate and work on a particular project. And one project may go for 2 or 3 months, and they try to keep them short. And if the findings of that project were positive, then they will do a second phase and a third phase and fourth phase. So far, it's been a very good model for the industry as a whole to kind of come together. And what I'd say for others in different industries is to kind of look to a similar model. How can you work collaboratively with other organizations to achieve a desired outcome? One other entity out there we've dealt with is called Ripple. So Ripple was one of the first blockchain activities we did, and it was in the spring of 2016. ATB was one of the first banks globally to test out the Ripple network, and we, in June of 2016, sent $1,000 to a bank in Germany, and the transaction was completed and finalized, and the funds received in the bank out there in 10 seconds. And really, it shone the light on how real and feasible this technology is. So, it demonstrated that, the banking industry can achieve those types of efficiencies. The challenge with a tool like Ripple, and I touched on this a bit with R3, is industry adoption. So, currently all the banks, globally are using, a platform like Swift for sending money transfers and wires globally. So to get a new system in place like Ripple, takes convincing several banks globally to get on board and do it. And that's what Ripple's been doing for the last year and a half, is really out there working with banks to try and get them to adopt their process or their protocol. Once that you achieve that adoption, then the banking industry as a whole and consumers as a whole can start to benefit from it. But unfortunately, that process takes time for getting multiple banks to go ahead and adopt that technology. I think that's going to be a bit of a trend across a number of different situations. Is that adoption will take time, especially because the basic premise of blockchain protocols is a very distributed network. You've got parties across a wide variety of geographies or situations all participating and using that protocol. So it takes time to achieve that adoption. So this is the first area that we're looking at, is how do we break down the services we do, break down the current processes we use and the current technologies to look to say, can we change the way we're doing that to take advantage of this technology. So that's been a critical area for us with a lot of focus. Let's move on to the next one. So this situation, earlier on, about a year ago, we were looking at blockchain, saying, what can we do? What can ATB do? What can we lead as an initiative within the blockchain space? And when we were looking at different scenarios and opportunities, one of them stuck out as being a significant opportunity because it's for one of our key industries, the oil and gas industry. So we thought this is a good place for us to start, because we can work on a solution that's going to actually impact one of the key industries in Alberta and make a big difference for a number of our corporate customers. So what we set out to do was look at the oil contract space, oil and gas contracts. And in the banking industry, our awareness and exposure to this is what's often called oil settlement day or check exchange day. Basically, all the contracts for oil and gas, the payments for those happen on one day each month. On the 25th of the month, those payments take place. So in the banking world, that's a crazy day. There's lots of funds moving around. The diagram on the left there, my slide with the dots and lines, that's actually November 25th, 2016, and that's real transaction data. Every dot on that diagram is a oil and gas company, and every line represents a payment from one company to another. In this diagram, at least one dot in every pair is an ATB customer. That's why we have visibility to the payments. But if you can imagine this and all the other oil and gas companies that were not necessarily or aren't customers of ATB, this diagram would be 10 or 20 times this size, and the payments and the connections would just be massive. And all these payments are taking place in one single day. And in this example, I'm showing each of these payments on average is about $500,000. So again, there's massive value moving around the economy on this single day each month. So what we looked at is to say, can we create a system that would help alleviate some pains in this space? And so what we did is we created a proof of concept. We worked with IBM, and in this case, we used their Hyperledger Fabric protocol. So Hyperledger Fabric is another flavor of blockchain. IBM originally developed it, but it's now open source. And Hyperledger is the name of an organization that's actually run by the Linux Foundation. And Hyperledger, its goal is to manage open source code for blockchain protocols. So they have about 5 or 6 different protocols that they are responsible for managing currently. And Fabric is one of those protocols. So Hyperledger Fabric is what we used for this project. And so we developed a proof of concept using Fabric, and basically what it allows and demonstrates is it's got a number of fictitious contracts in it, and it allows the participants on this proof of concept to approve and reject contracts, reconcile them to reflect actual values, and then again accept those and commit them for payment. And then on the payment side, the proof of concept then optimizes the payments that are taking place and provides netting, and then demonstrates what the payments would be. At this time, it's not utilizing real contracts or real information or making real payments, but it is writing to a blockchain and demonstrating that the workflow that it would go through. So we think there's significant potential here to provide more visibility to the payments that any particular organization has. In this scenario, in the proof of concept we've created, parties can only see contracts or payments that they're a part of. They're not able to see anybody else's payments, and that's one of the features within Hyperledger Fabric. It is a permissioned blockchain environment, so participants in the environment only see what they're supposed to see, and everything else is encrypted and people can't see it or have access to it. So that security is critical for this, and that's one of the reasons we picked Fabric for this particular use case. So where we're currently at with this project is we've been socializing it with the industry. We've had 8 one-on-one meetings with a number of oil and gas companies. And then last week we facilitated a workshop where we had about 8 oil and gas companies present together in one room, where we walked through this and had a good discussion around where the features should focus, what the significant pain points are that this could help alleviate, and then to walk through a roadmap of how we can move this forward with the industry. So at this point, it's an ATB-led initiative, and we're looking to engage a few members of the oil and gas industry to help us move this forward into the next phases. So currently we have planned about 3 or 4 phases of enhancements and improvements to this solution through 2018, and we'll be looking to at the end of 2018 be in a solid position to see if we can take this to market and have it help in processing those payments. So one of the other significant benefits we're trying to achieve with this too is that optimization of payments. So because this system as a whole would have visibility to all payments taking place, it could actually optimize all of those payments and reduce the number of transactions and provide more certainty of the payments. Even though these payments currently happen on one day each month, they do kind of happen from like 6 or 6:30 in the morning up until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And even that 11 or so hours during the day, that uncertainty of when those payments come in is a significant or has a significant impact on the industry. So if they could have more certainty that the payment's going to come in at for sure at 10 o'clock in the morning, and what that payment's going to be, that would help alleviate a lot of concerns and friction for them. Next topic we're focused on is more consumer facing. So Ted touched on this in the introduction. So what we're looking at here is giving Albertans control of their digital identity. And right now for consumers, if they go in and open up a bank account, or go in and get a new cell phone or insurance or utility or all these different services, they have to walk into each situation and prove who they are. And that could involve their driver's license, maybe a copy of a utility bill or a bank account statement. And it's quite a process for the consumer to go through, and each time they do it, they have to prove who they are and hand over that information. So there's a basic use case there of kind of customer onboarding, that if you had a trusted digital identity, rather than going through all those steps and sharing those individual pieces, you could actually share a token that contained all the required information from that a bank or a telco could be requesting from you. So the basic premise is kind of built around that. But what we're trying to work towards, and why we are working with Sovrin, is the concept of a self-sovereign identity. So make it so that the consumer is at the center of their identity management. Not that they're a user of their identity, but actually that they have control over it, and that nobody can take that identity away from them. So the Sovrin network is built around that principle of self-sovereign identity, and we think that from our perspective, if we can help deliver that to Albertans, it could be a significant value for them in the long term. And I think that this is, one of the blockchain spaces that's really going to have the biggest impact on consumers. Buying and sending Bitcoin or sending money globally, really from a typical day-to-day person's perspective, that's pretty frictionless. They can do that right now with their credit cards or email money transfers. It's not really that much of a challenge for people from a day-to-day banking perspective, but having control and trust over how their identity is being used is. And I think the Equifax breach that happened recently is kind of a good demonstration of the risks of the current systems we have right now. In that situation, you've got so much personal and financial information all being stored in one central location, and then that exposes the risk of that single location being breached, which it was. In the case of a self-sovereign digital identity, all of that identity information resides with the consumer, and they choose to share it securely with parties when they want to. So that's kind of the basic premise, but from there's a lot of layers of added value that can kind of come from it. And one of the simple use cases that gets referred to is the idea of a zero knowledge proof, which itself isn't maybe simple, but one example is if you were to go into a bar and have to prove that you were of legal drinking age. Currently, you pull out your driver's license. In some bars, they may actually take a scan of that and keep a record of it. And on your driver's license, there's your photo, your name, your address, your date of birth, your driver's license number, and other information on there that really has nothing to do with meeting the criteria of being legally allowed to drink. So in the example of a digital identity, what you can do is actually, through this model, you could walk into a bar, present your mobile phone with your digital identity on it, they could scan it, and it could come up with a photo of you. So that photo could be the photo from your driver's license, and that's been verified by somebody. And then it could come up with a thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether or not you meet the age requirement for that province that you're in. So in that case, you've taken back control over your birth date, your address. So, that's just a simple example, but, it's a real example too, where, women are, in situations where that information is being, given over, and maybe people end up harassing them as a result of that they've now got access to their address, or so that type of situation can be eliminated. And that institution or that bar, for example, no longer needs to store that information. All they need to know is you are who you say you are, and you meet that criteria. So again, with a zero knowledge proof, there can be many more kind of complex examples built on top of it. But recently we had another example how we could use this platform. I'm just going to walk through this example for you. The topic that came up was mortgage insurance, and related to this also insurance for a vehicle. So right now, if you get a mortgage with a bank, you also need to provide proof to the bank that you have insurance. So you would get your insurance documents in the mail, you would have them at home, and then you'd take a photocopy of them or scan them and send that to your bank, and the bank would then have record of your property or vehicle insurance. They would then keep record of that, and you'd have your mortgage. But what can happen then is if you default on your insurance payments, or something happens and that insurance is no longer valid, maybe you've even changed your insurance providers. Right now, what happens is the insurance companies send a letter to the bank notifying the bank that there's been a change to that insurance policy. So currently that's, for ATB, that it's about between 1,000 and 3,000 pieces of mail each week that ATB receives just from insurance companies regarding this. And so if you multiply that out, it's over 100,000 pieces of mail each year that are currently being sent to ATB for this. And so that's just ATB customers just within Alberta. Take this example and multiply it across all banks across all Canada, and we're into the millions of pieces of mail, several millions of pieces of mail each year, just related to notifying banks of a change of insurance. So when we got talking about this, the opportunity here is the way the Sovrin network works is based on what they call a verifiable claim. So the claim here is that the consumer has insurance, and it's been provided by an insurance company, and it's been verified by the insurance company. So what happens in the Sovrin network, there would be a cryptographic token sent from the insurance company to the consumer's digital identity wallet that they would have then in their digital wallet, and they would have control over. When they go to get that mortgage with the bank, they would then share that digital token with the bank, and the bank could see that that came from insurance company XYZ, and they would know that that's a trusted source, and there's no way to fudge that information. You can't fake it. It came from a trusted source. So right now we've eliminated, through this would eliminate the initial mailing of the insurance papers. If people are comfortable receiving them electronically, they could have it in their digital wallet, and also makes it quicker and easier for the consumer to get that mortgage. So if they were doing an online application for their mortgage, one of the pieces they could submit would be a digital token of their insurance policy. So if we go back to the situation of when that policy is no longer void or no longer valid, and it gets voided by the insurance company, that claim that they provided to the consumer gets voided, which in turn voids the claim that's been provided to the bank. At that point, the bank, through our systems, we could notify the consumer saying, we just received notification from that the policy you provided is no longer valid, and in an automated way, push back to the consumer saying, please contact us and provide the updated insurance for your property. So right now, you've eliminated a significant amount of paper that's being exchanged, and you've provided immediate connection between the bank and the consumer, so the situation can be rectified. So to me, this is like one reasonably simple and straightforward example of the types of verifiable claims, again, to use that term, that could be used on this type of network. And you start to build these up within the consumer's environment. And so what we're doing right now around this, we have 3 projects. One, we set up a Sovrin Steward node, which means we're operating a node on the network, which is what Ted referred to in the press release. We're also working with the R3 consortium and connecting the Corda network to the Sovrin network. And the third project we're just wrapping up now is with TELUS. So we actually did a project with TELUS where we, in a test environment, used the Sovrin network to create a customer record for a customer, give that to the fictitious customer, and allow and go through the steps of sharing that information with TELUS, and then vice versa. So we've just wrapping up that project, which was really kind of to demonstrate to ourselves how the workflow happens and how it works. So we'll be looking next year to kind of build the ecosystem of parties within Alberta that are interested in using this type of platform. So whether it's utilities or civic governments or provincial government or universities. So a university could issue a verifiable claim of a degree. A city could issue a verifiable claim of a building permit. So there's lots of different situations that can be thought of and consumed in here, and that's what we're going to be looking at doing in the next year. Just kind of quickly, this is just an example of a digital identity wallet that we made. So the screens here were, if I was in my mobile banking app through ATB, one section would be my identity management. And in here I can see all of my identity details. And on the right, it's very tiny there, but logos of who is attested to those facts about me. So this is just an example of what we could be working towards in giving a consumer an easy to use experience for managing and controlling these things. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to walk through. Again, I think there's great potential, and we're excited to kind of move forward in both kind of the commercial space with the oil and gas companies we're working with, and in the consumer space, taking identity, digital identity management to the next level. It isn't shown here in the slides, but we're also in the cryptocurrency space. It is a bit of a reality. It is out there. People are buying it and dealing with it. Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's mostly from a speculative investment perspective at this point. But we are looking at ways where we can support either consumers or businesses that are getting involved in this space. And we currently have a couple of pilot projects in that space that we're working on right now. So we're trying to get to the point where we can get away from being a bank that's afraid of cryptocurrencies because of the anonymity, and get to a point where we can work with organizations that have done the proper KYC, know your customer, and have in place proper processes for anti-money laundering and such, that ATB as a bank can be comfortable with, and therefore that we can start working with these organizations. So again, we have a couple of pilot projects right now, engaged with real companies, trying to work through what that process looks like. And with that, I want to wrap that up. That's the information I've got. We do have a website called atbalphabeta.com. And on that website, there are several articles about different technology initiatives that ATB is working on within our transformation team. But there are 2 or 3 articles up there specifically around the blockchain work that we're doing. So with that, Ted, I'll pass it back to you.
Well, that's excellent, Mike. So I would encourage folks to post questions through the online Q&A window. But while they're thinking about questions, Mike, I would just say I would really appreciated your comment on the Equifax data breach. From what I read about it, there were an estimated 143 million Americans who could be facing a serious threat of identity theft, and the hackers seized names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and even driver's license information. So, I think what you're getting at with some of this in terms of sovereign, decentralized digital identity is you are not one centralized kind of digital identity silo like the Equifax example.
Yeah, you can move it. There's still risks, obviously, but the risk gets moved to the fringe or on the edge. So that's where we need to make sure we have proper tools and processes for our customers, because that edge then becomes kind of the risk point. But we have those in place right now for online banking and mobile banking. So consumers are comfortable in that space. We want to make sure when we roll out digital identity that it's as easy as doing their online banking.
Well, and the other thing that I think is relevant that actually was mentioned within the previous presentation, Mike, was the EU and the Scandinavian countries seem to be sort of proactive in the whole look at by their governments about sort of the data, general data protection regulation guideline, which I think that whole my data model that Yogi presented on really starts to address, and they're considering the use of the sovereign decentralized digital identity as well.
Right. No, I think Europe is definitely ahead of North America when it comes to the protection of consumer identity and information. So I think they are doing a great job there, and the opportunity for us within ATB and Alberta is to really move this forward and have Alberta be at the leading edge as well.
Well, I was really interested in that comment that you made too about the pilot test with TELUS and the whole looking at sort of the use of this, the decentralized digital identity. Have you got any future plans with more collaboration with TELUS?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we're just wrapping up the current project, and from here we'll start to scope out what the next rounds of testing would look like, and whether we, it's again just us and TELUS, or if we expand that to include some other organizations. What I want to get to in the end is that we've got a good ecosystem of useful organizations that when we roll out digital identity, that it's not just an ATB thing, but rather the consumer sees that there are several organizations that they would normally deal with using it. So looking to expand who we're working with on that as well.
Well, in the comments that both you and Yogi made about sort of the sovereign-based decentralized identity is quite different in terms of energy consumption than your Bitcoin or Ethereum. So it could well power from more of a digital green economy perspective, Mike.
Yeah, and even the oil and gas example that I went through, each of the oil and gas companies each month are dealing with between in order of tens or hundreds up to a couple of thousand contracts each month, and every one of those contracts, they are there's phone calls, emails, faxes, and a significant amount of paper and process being used just to kind of manage each of those contracts, versus if they can be connected through a trusted platform that we're proposing, it takes away a lot of that A, manual effort, but B, kind of paper and process that's going back and forth currently.
Well, and I guess I guess my closing comment, and maybe we're not going to get any questions, Mike, but I guess my closing comment or question would be, it seemed like you mentioned that you are receptive to looking at potential pilot projects with either, the provincial government, city governments, or universities within Alberta.
Yeah, definitely. One back in November, there was a conference in Vancouver called Identity North, and as a part of that conference, they put on a blockchain design challenge, and it was working with the BC Land Titles Registry. And
excellent.
The challenge there was to develop or provide a design or concept for a blockchain-based solution for the management and distribution of land titles. So myself and my summer student submitted a proposal for that challenge, and we based it on the Sovrin network, and we were one of the 2 finalists for that challenge. So that information is published on the DIAC, Digital Identity and Authentication Council of Canada. So DIAC, DIACC.ca.
Oh, that's excellent, Mike.
On their website, that listed.
A question that's come in that I'll answer for you is, the question was, can this presentation be viewed again? And what I would like to say, happy to say, is that the presentation will be posted to our YouTube channel, which can be found in YouTube by simply searching for MCCAC. So as soon as we can, we'll have this presentation posted there.
Great.
So I would just give folks one last call in terms of any question to pose within Q&A. And I guess in closing, Mike, I would like to give you the opportunity to, whatever message in closing that you would like to give government folks in Alberta from ATB's perspective.
Yeah, I think a couple key takeaways for me is, in a lot of cases, look for collaboration opportunities. So look where are you doing something currently that involves a number of other parties, and see if you can collaborate. Secondly, around the digital identity platform and the concept of verifiable claims, every organization's got some fact that they have to prove to other individuals or organizations, and look at something like a self-sovereign identity like Sovrin for managing those verifiable claims. I think there's hundreds of different uses for that, and really that's what we're excited about, is kind of uncovering all those uses and providing that value to the province.
Well, Mike, this has been fantastic, and it's so cool to see an Alberta-based financial institution, I would say, if not leading nationally, leading within North America. Thanks so much for doing this for us.
It's great. Thank you for inviting me, Ted.
Okay. Thanks so much. Take care now.
Thank you.